Hello, and welcome to the third episode of League Lore and More. I'm your host, Funky Odor, and this week we are building on what we learned last week studying Azir by beginning the life and story of Xerath, his friend, brother, and betrayer. You can support the podcast on anchor.fm as well as supporting us wherever you listen to podcasts by downloading, liking, sharing, and however else you are comfortable doing so. Any support is greatly appreciated. For more League of Legends content, check out the stream on twitch.tv/thatfunkyodor and follow us on Twitter. Send any thoughts, suggestions, and criticisms to funkyodorgaming@gmail.com. Without further ado, let's get to the story of Xerath.
You shall bear witness to the only true Ascendant this day.
Xerath is known as the Magus Ascendant. Xerath is an ascended magus of ancient Shurima, a being of arcane energy writhing in the broken shards of a magical sarcophagus. For millennia, he was trapped beneath the desert sands, but the rise of Shurima freed him from his ancient prison. Driven insane with power, he now seeks to take what he believes is rightfully his and replace the upstart civilizations of the world with one fashioned in his image. The boy who would eventually be called Xerath was born a nameless slave in Shurima thousands of years ago. He was the son of captured scholars with only the prospect of endless servitude ahead. His mother taught him letters and numbers while his father told him tales from history in the hopes that such skills might allow him a better life. The boy vowed he would not end up bent back and whipped like every other slave. When the boy's father was crippled during the excavations for the foundations of a monument to the emperor's favorite horse, he was left to die at the site of the accident. Fearing her son would suffer a similar fate, the boy's mother begged an esteemed tomb architect to take him on as an apprentice. Though at first reluctant, the architect was impressed with the boy's eye for detail and innate understanding of mathematics and language, and accepted. The boy never saw his mother again. This reminds me of the Roman Emperor Caligula. He made his horse a senator, I think. And this Emperor Azir's father is building a monument to his horse, his favorite horse. He was a swift learner, and his master dispatched him on errands to the great library of Nasus. They're really kind of pounding home here the whole Shurima is ancient Egypt vibe here. The Great Library of Nasus is obviously parallels to the Great Library of Alexandria. And then this kind of meshes with what we learned last week. So Xerath meets Azir while he's at the Great Library, and they form a friendship. And then Azir names him Xerath. And then Azir, takes him as a servant for like his household, and their friendship and brotherhood grows throughout the years. And then the assassins ambush the caravan and kill Azir's older brothers, and so Azir is now the heir, even though his father hates him, and Xerath is still there, like, throughout all of this. He saves Azir's life during the ambush. We learned all this in last week's episode on Azir, and Xerath, being as smart as he is, understands that Azir can't rely on just, being who he is currently, which is, a learned scholar type person, and so he convinces Azir to learn to fight, and so Azir must train under Renekton to learn how to be a good soldier. And it's during the time between Azir's rise to power as emperor, and that being the end date here, and then it's between the time of the ambush and Azir's rise to emperor, that Xerath is just absorbing and acquiring tons and tons of knowledge, and he's using this to grow powers that he's starting to develop these magical abilities, most likely incantations that he's learning to use and harness through learning magic and the spells. And years passed, and Xerath took these powers and used them to prevent the wife of the emperor from bearing another son. He would basically cause her to have miscarriages, and he was doing this because he knew that if she had another son, then the emperor would basically get rid of Azir, probably kill him or send him far away to do nothing because he didn't care for him, and so another son would just basically spell the end of Azir's life. And so Xerath did everything that he could. But despite Xerath's best efforts to thwart the queen's midwives, a new prince of Shurima was brought into the world. But on the night of its birth, Xerath used his growing magical powers to summon the elemental spirits of the deep desert and craft a terrible storm. Xerath brought bolt after bolt of lightning down upon the queen's chambers, reducing it to burning rubble and killing the queen and her newborn son. The emperor rushed to his queen's chambers only to be confronted by Xerath, his hands ablaze with arcane power. The emperor's guards attacked, but Xerath burned them and the emperor to cindered skeletons. Xerath ensured that the mages of a conquered territory were blamed for these deaths, and Azir's first act upon taking the throne was to lead a brutal campaign of retribution against its people. Azir was crowned Emperor of Shurima with Xerath at his side, the boy who had once been a nameless slave. Xerath had long dreamed of this moment and expected Azir to end slavery in Shurima before finally naming him brother. Azir did none of these things, continuing to expand his empire's borders and deflecting Xerath's overtures regarding the end of slavery. To Xerath, this was further proof of Shurima's moral bankruptcy, and he raged at Azir's breaking of his promise. Azir's face was thunderous as he reminded Xerath that he was a slave and should remember his place. Something once noble died in Xerath that day, but he bowed in supplication, outwardly accepting Azir's decision. As Azir continued his campaigns of conquest, Xerath remained at his side, but his every action was carefully designed to increase his influence over a realm he now planned to take for himself. To steal an empire was no small thing, and Xerath knew he needed more power. The famous legend of Renekton's Ascension revealed that a mortal did not have to be chosen by the Sun Priests, that anyone could rise up. So Xerath plotted to steal the power of Ascension. No slave could ever stand upon the sun disk, so Xerath fed the Emperor's vanity, inflating his ego and filling his head with impossible visions of a world-spanning empire. But such a dream would only be possible if Azir could ascend as the greatest heroes of Shurima had before. In time, Xerath's perseverance paid off, and Azir announced he would undertake the Ascension ritual, that he had earned the right to stand alongside Nasus and Renekton as an ascended being. The Sun Priests protested, but such was Azir's hubris that he ordered them to comply on pain of torture and death. We are going to break from the biographical story here and read the story that goes along with this, because it deals with the Ascension ritual and what happens from Xerath's point of view instead of what we learned last time with Azir's point of view. It's called Unbound, and as we know, Azir is up on the dais, and he's midway through the Ascension ritual, and then Xerath pushes him off the dais and takes it for himself, and then it wipes out Shurima, and Shurima ends because of this. But here is the story. It's called Unbound. This was the moment, the singular moment that had cost him so much, that had taken a lifetime of planning. A corrupt empire and its strutting princeling would be struck down under the blankly idiotic sun symbol they both so trusted. The key to immortality, jealousy, guarded and miserably offered, would be his alone, stolen in front of the entire world. A singular moment of perfect vengeance that would finally free the slave known as Xerath. Though his master's helm revealed no human expression, and knowing that the lovingly etched metal could not respond in kind, Xerath smiled up at the soulless hawk's face just the same, his joy genuine. A life spent in servitude, first for a mad emperor and now a vain one, endless manipulations for and against the throne, a near damning quest for barely remembered knowledge that almost consumed him. All of it led to this grotesque masquerade of ascension. The very word when spoke aloud was an assault. We will ascend, while you are chained to the broken stone as the sands of time swallow you all. No, not anymore, and never again. The chosen golden lords will not be taken into the sun's embrace and made gods. A slave will do this, a simple slave, a boy who once had the misfortune to save a noble child from the sands. And for this sin, Xerath had been punished with a horrible, maddening promise. Freedom. Unobtainable. Forbidden. Should the thought even dart through a slave's mind, it would be punished by death, as the Ascended could gaze past flesh and bone deep into one's very soul, to see its dim, traitorous glow. And yet, there it was, spoken by the young princeling he dragged from the embrace of the mercurial mother desert. Azir, the golden sun, vowed that he would free his savior and new friend. A promise unkept to this day, the words of a grateful child, innocently oblivious to the impact they would have. How could Azir upend thousands of years of rule? How could he fight tradition, his father, his destiny? In the end, the young emperor would lose it all by not honoring his word. And so Xerath was elevated and educated, eventually becoming Azir's trusted right hand, but never a free man. The soured promise ate into what he was, and what he could have been. Denied a small, simple thing, the right to live his life, Xerath decided to take everything. All of the things denied to him, all of the things he deserved, the empire, ascension, and the absolute purest form of freedom possible. With each step taken toward the offensively grandiose dais of ascension, positioned respectfully behind his emperor and flanked by the inept sentinels who supposedly protected Shurima, Xerath felt an unknown lightness he was genuinely shocked by. Was this joy? Does vengeance bring joy? The impact was almost physical. At that very moment, the overwrought suit of golden armor that was his tormentor abruptly halted and turned and walked toward Xerath. Could he know? How could he possibly know? This spoiled, self-obsessed boy, this righteous, falsely benevolent emperor whose hands were just as bloody as Xerath's own? Even if he did, there was no staying the killing blow that was already in motion. Xerath had planned for every contingency. He had bribed, killed, outmaneuvered, and plotted for decades. He even tricked the monstrous brothers Nasus and Renekton into staying away from the event, but he had not planned for this. The Emperor of Shurima, the Golden Sun, beloved of Mother Desert, soon to be ascended, took off his helmet, revealed his proud brow and smiling eyes, and turned to his oldest and most trusted friend. He spoke about the love of brothers, the love of friends, of hard fights won and others lost, of family, of future, and finally, of freedom. At these words, the guards flanked Xerath, moving in, weapons drawn. So the princeling did know. Had Xerath's plans had been undone? But the fools in armor were saluting. There was no menace to them. They were honoring him. They were congratulating him on his freedom. He hated his master, had just freed him. He had freed them all. No Shuriman would ever wear chains again. Azir's last act as a human was to unfetter his people. The Foundation's shuddering roar of the assembled masses drowned out any response Xerath could have had. Azir donned his helmet and strode out onto the dais, his attendants preparing him for the godhood that would never come. Xerath stood in the shadow of the monolithic sun disk, knowing that an empire-destroying doom was but seconds away. Too late, friend. Too late, brother. Far too late for us all. The end. So there we see his motives and the lead up to the Ascension ritual, and we'll see more with his biography here, more from the ritual and what all kind of takes place there. So he had Nasus and Renekton off fighting this monster that Xerath himself had released from this sarcophagus, this basically thing that was binding it. away, and so they went to go deal with that, as they were the only ones that could deal with it, as they were the ascended beings. And so after being freed and all the slaves being freed, and Xerath still goes through with his plan, and he knocks Azir out of the dais, and the energy blasts across the city and just kills all of the people. And what it says is that even as the city burned, Xerath held the Sun Priests in his grip of magic, preventing them from ending the ritual. The energies filling him were immense, alloying with his dark sorcery to create a being of incredible power. As he drew ever more of the sun's power into his body, his mortal flesh was consumed and remade as a glowing vortex of arcane power. With Xerath's treachery revealed, Renekton and Nasus rushed to the epicenter of the magical storm, destroying the city. They bore with them the magical sarcophagus that had imprisoned the spirit of eternal fire. The Ascended Brothers fought their way to the dais of Ascension just as Xerath fell from the deadly radiance engulfing the city. Before the newly ascended mages could react, they hurled his crackling body within the sarcophagus and sealed it once more with blessed chains and powerful sigils of binding. But it was not enough. Xerath's power had been great as a mortal, and that power combined with the gift of Ascension made him all but invincible. He shattered the sarcophagus, though its shards and chains remained bound to him. Renekton and Nasus hurled themselves at Xerath, but such was his newfound strength that he fought them both to a standstill. The battle raged through the collapsing city, destroying what had not already sunk beneath the sands. The brothers were able to drag Xerath toward the Tomb of Emperors, the greatest mausoleum of Shurima, a vault whose locks and wards were impossible to break and which answered only to the blood of emperors. Renekton wrestled Xerath within and called upon Nasus to seal the vault behind them. He called on them to seal the vault behind them. Nasus did so with heavy heart, knowing it was the only way to prevent Xerath's escape. Renekton and Xerath fell into eternal darkness, and there they remained, locked in an endless battle as the once great civilization of Shurima collapsed. Uncounted centuries passed, and in time even Renekton's mighty strength waned, leaving him vulnerable to Xerath's influence. With poison, lies, and illusions, Xerath twisted Renekton's mind, filling him with misplaced bitterness toward Nasus, the faithless brother who had, in Xerath's fictive narrative, abandoned him so long ago. So we see that Nasus and Renekton fight Xerath, and then basically the only way to keep him down is to lock him in this vault, and the only way that they could get him in there was that if one of them was in there with him. And so Nasus leaves Renekton behind with Xerath. And then this is how, like, when you're playing the game, Renekton is, he's crazy. He's always talking about, getting Nasus, and then Nasus is very, he speaks like, I don't know, like an ancient wise man, and just kind of makes you feel bad for Renekton when you're playing, knowing this information that he wasn't always like this. You kind of start to feel bad that he was then corrupted by Xerath. But so that's Xerath's biography. But then the end of it ends with the Tomb of Emperors being discovered and opened by Sivir, and Renekton being freed and going out to find Nasus because he wants to get revenge on what he feels now is Nasus betraying him. And so Xerath is now freed as well. And then he can also sense that Azir has been resurrected or reborn, and knows that they are on a collision course. So yeah, so that's Xerath. And then each week now we're going to do 2 comparisons to people in either literary works or film, and a historical comparison if I can find a good one. 2 combined. So this week we're going to have 2 film or TV comparisons. I didn't really have a great historical one that fit this kind of storyline. You could do kind of basically all of like the traitor or the people who betray people in history. So Judas or with Jesus, or Brutus and the other senators and conspirators against Julius Caesar. Et tu, Brute, or like Benedict Arnold or something like that. But that being said, we can get into the film and TV comparisons, even though one of these, I guess, is also in books. So the first one isn't the main one. It's kind of like a sub one, and then the second one will be kind of the one that I really want to focus on. And the first one then is Theon Greyjoy from the Game of Thrones series, or the book series A Song of Ice and Fire, which then is what all the source material is for the first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, the TV show. Theon Greyjoy was the son of Balon Greyjoy of the Iron Islands, which is one of the 7 kingdoms of the Game of Thrones universe that everyone is fighting for. So it's a game of of thrones, but there's one king who rules over all 7, and then everyone's vying for that throne. So he's son of Balon Greyjoy of the Iron Islands. The Greyjoys were famous for their naval capabilities as well as their failed rebellions against the throne. They rebelled against King Robert of the House Baratheon only a few years after Robert came to power after defeating the Targaryen dynasty. The rebellion was crushed swiftly, and punishment was due to befall the Greyjoys. Young Theon, only a little boy, was sent to live with the Stark family in the northern realm of the kingdom as a ward, as part of the punishment. The warden of the north, Eddard Stark, was charged with the care of Theon and raised him among his family. But we see in the show that Theon is very clearly beneath the other Stark children, and naturally so. He's not, a blood child of Eddard Stark. He is a clear servant to Lord Stark, as he should be, but he isn't treated harshly. He tells him to do something, and Theon does it, but he's definitely not like a son in that sense. But he's definitely above more common people because he is from a noble house. The Stark children are more or less siblings to him, as he has known them longer than his own family by the time he's a teenager and a young adult. And when the show starts, he's entering manhood, and so he's been there since he's been a small boy. So he's, that's the family that he's known. And so being taken and never seeing them again until, Theon does later down the line, but essentially never seeing them again. Xerath, never sees his mother again after leaving at a young age to become an apprentice. Theon betrays his brother, Robb Stark, his, chosen brother, more or less, not blood brother. So Robb Stark, who's the son of Eddard Stark, is betrayed by Theon as Robb is trying to achieve glory and retribution for his family after his father is killed by the ruling king at the time. And so Robb has marched south, since they're all the way up in the north. He's marched south with his army, and he's crushing battle after battle, and the war isn't won, and it's not close to being won, but there's hope and things look brighter, and Theon decides to Robb sends him to the Iron Islands to try and form an alliance with Balon Greyjoy, who is still Lord of the Iron Islands, even though he rebelled against the throne. And he sends him there, and Theon decides to side with his blood family over his adopted family. And his father, says that he wouldn't align with Robb Stark, and that they should then go and pillage and raid the north. And Theon takes Winterfell, the capital, the main castle of the north where the Starks live. That's their home. It's where Theon was raised. He he seizes Winterfell, since Robb and all of the armies of the north are down south fighting. So he takes the castle, and then what appears to be burns the bodies of Robb's two younger brothers who were too young to go to war, and one was a cripple. It turns out that they weren't the actual brothers, but that causes a bit of an issue. After Theon's uprising is done away with by men who were still up there that were soldiers, that word reached them that they needed to go retake Winterfell for Robb Stark. There's again punishment to be dealt. He's sent to be a slave, basically, of the new lords of Winterfell, the Boltons, and he serves the demented son Ramsay, who tortures him and stuff. I mean, you could think of this parallel to the banishment and an eternity locked away, similar to Xerath, since there does not appear to be a way out with for Theon here. Or you could think of Ramsay as Xerath kind of in this situation, and Theon as maybe Renekton, since Renekton's mind gets so distorted and corrupted. The motives are similar, and Theon definitely is evil for a large part of the Game of Thrones story. But with comparisons, it's good that there are differences, in my opinion, and Theon definitely has several, and this isn't like just a mirror image, obviously. There were just similarities that I did see. He does redeem himself in the end several times, and thus we'll have to wait and see if Xerath finds redemption. But as it sits, he has not and does not really seem to seek it out. So I'd be surprised if that's how the lore continues, if they ever do continue it, the story of Azir and Xerath. So now on to the main one, the one that I thought was a lot more parallels, and that is Xerath to Anakin Skywalker from Star Wars. Both Xerath and Anakin grew up as slaves, but were sent away by their mothers in order for them to have better lives. Anakin's mom allows him to go with Qui-Gon and go to Coruscant and become a Jedi. And Xerath's mom sends him away to be an apprentice and never sees him again. Anakin sees his mother again once as she's dying. So very similar origins here for the two of them. Anakin grows up learning and doing what he always wanted to do, become a Jedi. Xerath very much wanted to be a scholar and a learned man, eventually being able to cast magic similar to the ability of Jedi to manipulate the Force. Anakin was the right-hand man and apprentice to one of the most powerful Jedi in existence in Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was a high-ranking member of the Jedi Council. More than just that, though, they were brothers and best friends, just like Azir and Xerath. Let's listen to what Obi-Wan, going as Ben Kenobi, had to say to Luke about his father in A New Hope.
He was the best star pilot in the galaxy, and a cunning warrior. I understand you've become quite a good pilot yourself. And he was a good friend.
I can just see, Azir having a similar type of conversation with, like, Sivir or someone if they were to ask about Xerath, even though he still has this anger towards him. And Obi-Wan here, even though he's very tranquil, he still understands that even though Luke's father was evil, that there were still good parts to him. That might not be the case with Azir and Xerath, but it just seemed like, he would reminisce on all the good times and what he once was compared to what he is now. That it just really reminded me of that clip. Anakin was about to become a Jedi Master, but had been growing increasingly frustrated with the Jedi Order's decisions regarding his status. They put him on the Jedi Council, but didn't give him the rank of Master, which had never been done before, and that angered him. Coupling this with the influence of the dark side and Anakin's own fears about losing those he loves pushed him over the edge. Xerath pushed Azir out of Ascension, the pinnacle of Azir's existence and the high point of Shurima. Anakin's similar deed is that he amputates, without permission the arm of Mace Windu as Mace is about to strike down the Sith Lord Darth Sidious, aka Chancellor Palpatine, aka the Senate, which would bring an end to the devastating Clone Wars. By saving the Sith Lord, he enables the execution of Order 66, which causes Obi-Wan's life to be put in jeopardy by his own soldiers. Xerath pushing Azir out of Ascension and causing his death can be seen in this same manner. Okay, it brings the end to the Shuriman Empire, and Anakin brings an end to the Galactic Republic, and then it gets formed into the Empire, which is this oppressive regime. And, you know, Azir and Nasus are sent away to go fight this fight, and there's another parallel there that, you know, the two best warriors that, and the ones that probably could have stopped Xerath from doing what he did, possibly, were sent away, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi and Yoda are also sent away on missions to go fight battles against the droid armies that are attacking. Can be seen in that same light, right? They're sent away. They're the ones that could prevent Anakin from doing what he did. But what happened right before Azir began his Ascension ritual? He freed the slaves and made Xerath his lawful brother. What happened to Anakin before Mace Windu confronted the Sith Lord? Mace Windu said that Anakin will have earned his trust and basically implied that Anakin would become a master without saying it. Obi-Wan even said the same thing before departing to locate and destroy the enemy commander, General Grievous. Let's listen to their last exchange as friends and not enemies.
I've been arrogant, and I apologize. I've just been so frustrated with the Council.
You are strong and wise, Anakin, and I am very proud of you. I have trained you since you were a small boy. I have taught you everything I know, and you have become a far greater Jedi than I could ever hope to be. But be patient, Anakin. It will not be long before the Council makes you a Jedi Master.
Obi-Wan, may the Force be with you.
Goodbye, old friend. May the Force be with you.
The next time that those two would meet would be on Mustafar. They would duel with Obi-Wan amputating, again without permission, kind of with permission, the arms and legs of Anakin, who is at that point Darth Vader. And what's funny about that whole thing is that he turns to the dark side because he thinks it's going to save his wife, because he thinks she's going to die in childbirth, but he like straight up chokes her out before he fights Obi-Wan. Like, that doesn't make any sense. But I don't think that really had that big of an impact on the whole story. Anyway, Azir has been reborn and Xerath has been freed from his prison. They seem destined for a battle that will alter the state of Shurima and Runeterra, much like, you know, the duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin / Darth Vader on Mustafar, as well as their duel on the Death Star in A New Hope. I guess the lesson to be learned today, though, is patience. Like 10 more minutes of patience before hatching your evil plans, and you might prevent catastrophe. But that wouldn't make for a great story, now would it? This analogy, though, the Anakin to Obi-Wan, or like the brothers that turn against each other type thing, is probably going to come back into play with our upcoming discussions of Nasus and Renekton, as they are true brothers and more equals than Azir and Xerath. I like the lead-in that each of these stories is giving us for the following episode, though. We ended our story of Xerath with him being trapped for a millennia with Renekton and tormenting and twisting his mind against his brother Nasus, who sealed them in the chamber so that Xerath could not escape. You know, when playing the game, Renekton's voice lines are about finding Nasus, defeating him, getting revenge, and I've mentioned all of this. He wasn't always like that, but a millennia with the Magus Ascendant, Xerath, is going to corrupt your mind. We explore that dynamic and how Renekton's story unfolds next time on League, Lore, and More. That does it for this week's episode. Thank you to everyone who listened this far or at all. I truly appreciate everyone for supporting the podcast. Please share the content if you enjoy it or have friends that you think would enjoy it. You can find this on YouTube. You can enjoy more of my content on twitch.tv/thatfunkyodor, and you can suggest things for the podcast to me on Twitter, as well as at funkyodorgaming@gmail.com. Also, the YouTube videos, I'm including pictures of things that are relevant, and when I talk about comparisons, and I try to find scenes from online that showcase kind of what the scenery might look like. So if you enjoy that, then you can go and watch them on YouTube. All of these links will be in the description. Join me again next week as we continue this epic tale of family, betrayal, power, and greed. So I will see you guys next time, and thanks for listening.